As teachers relatively new to the differentiated instruction frame of mind, the 5th grade team has collaborated on ways to embed choice based on desired outcomes and student learning profiles. Think-Tac-Toe is one way they've begun to provide options for students to demonstrate their understanding.
This Think-Tac-Toe grid is a way for you to show me what you have learned about our big question that we're studying right now in social studies. We're focusing all of our attention at this time, we're focusing all of our attention at this time on what was life truly like in the 13 colonies. You boys and girls have done many things to help you understand what life was like not only for the children in colonial times, but you've been able to understand what adult life was like in colonial times. We began our study by completing the chart, which is over on the chalkboard. We went ahead at that time, I asked you to write down things that you already knew about the 13 colonies. Now, you boys and girls are very lucky because the reason you're so lucky is you had some information already in your brains before we even began this study of the 13 English colonies. So as we began learning about those 13 colonies, you took the information you knew, and then we did some more reading together to help you better understand that. And then I presented for you the colonial Think-Tac-Toe. With this colonial Think-Tac-Toe, you were asked to choose 3 activities that you wanted to complete. You were asked to choose one activity from this first column, and in this first column, you had to create something. Many of you are using authentic materials, and you are creating a colonial shop sign. Mrs. Smith asked you to get started on making a colonial shop sign, but then I kind of threw something else at you, and I asked you, not only do I want you to make this colonial shop sign, but I also want you to take the opportunity to write a paragraph that you could share with me and your fellow classmates about what does a blacksmith do on a day-to-day basis? What does a milliner do on a day-to-day basis? If you decided the colonial shop sign wasn't for you, some of you are at home building a Mayflower ship, in which I can see the inside of a Mayflower ship. Some of you have also decided to build a colonial colony, such as the Spanish, French, or British settlements, like St. Augustine, Roanoke Island, Quebec, Santa Fe, and Jamestown. If you decided, or after you decided to complete one of these activities, you went over and chose a writing activity. Some of you have begun working on a Venn diagram, comparing and contrasting kids today with those colonial kids. Some of you have begun to do a brochure. And the nice thing about the brochure, we've got the poster on the back wall that tells us about those 13 English colonies, when they were founded, who founded them, what year, and many of their products that they sell or that they produce in their colony. The last choice in this column was to write and illustrate an ABC colonial book. Now, boys and girls, you're working on these activities as a way for you to show me, do you understand what life was like in colonial times? These are all different avenues that you take to come to that final destination of saying, Mrs. Smith, I know what life was like in colonial times. And you can also teach your fellow classmates what life was like in that time period. So today, what I'm going to allow you to do is to get some great work time on this, because as you noticed, this is due very soon, March the 16th, which isn't this Friday, but next Friday. The way today is going to work is you're going to have time to work independently. Some of you will work with me if you have questions, and some of you might partner up as a better way to help you get through maybe your ABC Colonial book. We're going to begin even numbers. You're going to get work time first today. Odd numbers, you're going to be working on an anchor activity at this time. But some of you still have a colonial map you need to finish. So if your colonial map is not complete, if it's your time to work on anchor activities, start there. If your colonial map is already all finished and turned into Mrs. Smith, go ahead and start those anchor activities. Are there any questions? Ladies and gentlemen, if you remember today when you're working, follow that rule of 3. Ask yourself, ask a classmate, and then ask Mrs. Smith, because oftentimes you have that information already here or with one of your classmates before you need to come to me. Elisar? Who's starting today working on Think-Tac-Toe? Haley? Even numbers start. What are odd numbers going to do? Ashley? On an anchor activity? What else can you do? Besides that, what else can you do, Ashley? Yes. Make sure that those maps are done by Wednesday because I'm going to collect them from you. Okay? Are there any questions?
Kristen, you did such an interesting think-tac-toe for your kids on the colonial times, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you determine what kinds of opportunities, invitations to process you give to kids on those based on what you want them to know, understand, and do.
Okay. I began by determining the state standard that I wanted them to master. And then I went about deciding on their multiple intelligences because I did an interest survey at the beginning of the school year to determine which kids were bodily kinesthetic or verbal linguistic. And then I developed my columns in my Think-Tac-Toe, one that would support those verbal linguistic kids, one that would support the bodily kinesthetic kids, one that would allow them to be more creative and develop something. So then once that I had determined those three columns, then I went ahead and decided different activities that I thought would be engaging for students, that would allow them to use what they know and present it in an exciting way.